Hello SGD, Sacred Geometry Decoded. This will be part 2. In part 1 I was looking at the Fibonacci spiral and how it is focusing on J.J. Abrams and Disney, how the golden ratio, the golden spiral, the Fibonacci numbers are used, embedded by popular culture, but of course this all has ancient origins, but especially, well, let's look at modern popular culture. So Fibonacci spiral, golden ratio was the first connection. Thinly veiled, or just out in place in movies and culture, and now this whole area is just considered to be a little bit kooky or whatever, or that we're seeing patterns that aren't there, but we'll be looking in this episode, taking it further, and so with Fibonacci numbers, golden spiral. Now let's look at the number 108 and how these connect. And so I should have put the links in the last one, but this has a lot to do with, well, pentagram, pentagon, perfect representation of the golden ratio, phi, and even the numbers embed, like 72 degrees, 108 degrees, 36 now, even 54, half of 108 comes in there. But we'll be looking at quick glimpse at 72, but then we'll be looking at 108, and especially by shows such as Fringe or the TV show Lost. And of course this connects ancient architecture via the golden ratio, such as the Great Pyramid, I M Pei, I won't mention all of them, but Norman Foster. These people are all working by the Cremona scale. We'll come to that at the end, which has to do with every single Disney, major Disney castle, and of course a Disney symbol and connections therein. So alright, let's get into it. Lost and Fringe. And so we saw that it's just there, it's in place now, because phi and the golden ratio, not so well known, but it's, you know, it's embedded in nature, and it just really is a beautiful, it is divine in that it's part of creation. So whether you're, whatever bent you are, religious or non-religious, it doesn't matter. It exists, and it is defining nature. So part 1 was about PHI-llywood, or the use of phi. Now coming back to the pentagram and the pentagon, golden ratio, and the angle such as 72, which is in trig, goes to phi, and 108. So Bad Robot, J.J. Abrams. Now J.J. Abrams was involved with Star Trek and Into Darkness. Now the Khan in that movie, eventually the plot led to him that these supposed torpedoes actually contained 72 companions of his, and he was trying to get these genetically engineered people back. But 72 is a really important number in the esoteric ancient religions and traditions. For instance, 72 accomplices of Set to conspire against Osiris, 72 disciples of Confucius, and in Luke 10 Jesus sent out 72 disciples. Could also link that to 73. I'll put the link in, because that again, 37 and 73, how they connect, and it's embedded in this nice architecture and how it converts over. But sun and moon, using the ancient units, how again these just beautifully convert over. So important in geometry, such as the Yugas, you'll find it as well, even the Mayans. 72 heartbeats per minute at resting, body about 72% water. But now Eastern traditions, I'm not going to go into all because you'll find it in Islamic architecture, Christian architecture, and other places as well. But Eastern very important number in Eastern traditions, and this will be directly relevant to the connections, especially like in Lost as well. Units of weights and measure and music, and these connect now also. For instance, I mentioned earlier that movie Pi, which was really based on 5, but there was a 216-digit number. Now in Kabbalist and Hermeticism and branches of Judaism, where you have the sign Shin, which you'd also have a letter Shin, which represents fire, but 216 letters or 72 parts. And even like in Kershaw and other esoteric Hermeticists as well, the use of the concept of the 72 names of God, very similar to the Pi movie as well, what was happening there. But 108 and 72. So Now, what you'll notice is that there's these crossovers. Now, for instance, Monkey or Journey to the West, Sun Wukong, all nice hump, but for instance, in a single somersault, in a single leap, he could somersault 108,000 li. Now, even a li is a Chinese unit of measurement. We'll come to that in a moment. But he could also make 72 transformations. So you'll see 72 and 108 in Eastern traditions being really important. For instance, 108 stars of destiny. This is a common theme in Chinese and just generally across the East. Buddhism, Hindus, even in not Shinto, but Taoists, for instance. 108 stars of destiny, 36 heavenly spirits, 72 earthly fiends. Now 36, 72 and 108 being angles also in the pentagram. Now, for instance, in Shaolin, there are, in small and the big Lu Han Quan, 72 movements. So 36 plus 72 is 108 movements. And even these, so whichever way you go, and you always come to these very important harmonic, Pythagorean numbers. Borobudur Temple, I did a whole long series going into all the measurements and the connections in there. But for instance, there are 72 Buddhist statues and 72 niches. Now, if you go all the way down, you get 432. So 108 times 2 is 216, times 2 is 432. For instance, again, Pythagorean tuning. But back to Bad Robot and J.J. Abrams. And let's begin with Fringe. Now, the pilot episode of Fringe, the passenger number was 108. Let's call that a coincidence. But in the show Lost, which has a lot of Eastern symbolism, let's put it that way, in there. And again, I'm not including I'm not going to go through all the mosques and churches and cathedrals and all these. I'm just going to, because of this Dharma initiative, looking at the focus on the Eastern traditions. But Passenger 108 in Fringe, the pilot episode. But again, we covered Fringe and the golden ratio. Now let's go a bit further. So, importance of 108 to the golden ratio. Pilot episode of Fringe 108. But let's look at Lost. So there was this clock that they had to reset, and it reset every 108 minutes. If it was left to run till the end, it come to these hieroglyphs. I won't go into those. But now throughout the show, 108 is just constantly reappearing over and over again. 108 cases of wine. Now, even for instance, CV3, or that's in Roman numerals 108. Now there's also CV3 there, but this again, just this constant theme coming again. And also there was a lighthouse, and the protractor or the compass was pointing to 108 degrees. Fifth Element, which is also has a lot of these nice connections as well. Again, how certain people in Hollywood, just drop these things in there. Now there's that helm to 108, so let's go to 108 degrees. I couldn't find the shot as well, but again, they're working in a set. It's not just sort of let's rock up to a hotel and pretend it's part of this space cruise ship. And again, like the room 108 is also highlighted there, although momentarily. But if you're not familiar with these things, you sort of pass them over. Now, for instance, use of the number 33, which we'll come to briefly. Again, I did a long series on that, how that is used and repeated throughout there. But now, helm to 108 or 108 degrees, of course, is the interior angle of a pentagon, but it's also one of the defining angles inside a pentagram. And 108 in trig brings us to 5, the golden ratio. Now, the Dharma initiative in the show Lost, the person, there was like these instructional videos, and the person would be replaced every 540 days, and then they were working this clock to reset it every 108 minutes. Well, interior angle of a pentagon, 108 degrees, so the sum of the interior angles is 540. You can go, there's lots of websites, but the Lostpedia goes into many other appearances of this 108 number, so I won't. Now, for instance, you'll see a lot more. I'm only covering a small part of them. because I want to look at them from a slightly different angle. But again, this a lot of this symbolism in there. Now, in the crossword which they were doing, there was 108 questions, and the one that they were pondering and they show is question 42, Enkidu's friend. So 108 questions, and they're question 42, and the answer to that is, who is Enkidu's friend? That's Gilgamesh. There's also a mural that they show, and that's one of these little, now you have the eye and the ichthys or the fish, but 108, 108, and also 42. This being an important number that they refer, but 108, 108, and 42, and we'll come back to that because that's very strongly connected once you understand the architectural practices. But who is Gilgamesh? For instance, the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is this, includes an ancient flood story and a description of an ark, and they give very specific measurements for the ark. I've covered this again. This is just the New Jerusalem in Revelations is pretty much just a revised version of the Epic of Gilgamesh, Tablet 11, and it describes the bitumen used, the pitch, the porters, and the oil used, and what you'll find is 108, 108, 108, 108, and even the dimensions given just so happens when so 120 cubits long, wide, and deep, which means the maximum visible edge length that you can see on there is 1080 cubits. Now in that same, in the Lost show, there's this printout, and the keen-eyed fans notice that if you convert that to base 60 to decimal, we arrive at 108. Now that's nice, because Gilgamesh, the Sumerians, Babylonians, used a base 60 number system. That's why we have 60 minutes per hour, 60 seconds per minute. Also the 360 compass breaks down into 60 minutes per degree and 60 seconds per compass, per minute of the compass. Now 108 questions. Now even the Dharma Initiative, well, we have the I Ching, and I'll put the link in, but Nuwa and Fuzi, the weights, measures, astronomy, music, it's the same what Hermes Trismegistus or what Thoth and Sheshet are in ancient Egypt, and they also hold the compass and the square. I'll put a link into there because the word magic, what wand translates to measuring tool, and whether it's the god of weights and measures such as Thoth or Hermes, Nuwa and Fuzi and Sheshet, and how this, well, magic, that's what the wand translates to. But back to 108 questions. Dharma, so there are 108 questions, therefore there are 108 answers. Now in Buddhism, Buddha was once asked 108 questions, and he made 108 statements. And as a side note, synchronicity, so when I was looking into this a while ago, back 2016, roughly there, well, question 37, and if you're familiar with the other videos, how 37 appears, connected to, for instance, measurements that bring us to 666, and same, again, I'll put a few links in there, because, again, I'll just go through that, but, well, I just sort of grabbed a random crossword, just one of those synchronicity things. So question 37 is a Belgian port, which is Ghent, and has strong connections to me because that's where my better half until recently was living. And question 42 was the main one. Well, just so happened that question 42 on this crossword was Ghent as well. So that's just a tip of the hat to my better half. But Esoterics of Ghostbusters, including 666 and 1776. So that will link to 37. And also recently made a compilation of an older series talking about esoteric architecture, measurement systems, and even now 55, 66, and 792. Now keep in mind 66 because, well, you have to watch that because it's hours and hours. I can't rehash everything. But 108, 108, and 42, this very important number. Now in the Lost show as well, one of the main features was his character had just won the lottery, and the lotto numbers that he showed are a recurring theme. But if you add them all up together, we get 108. 108, just again the recurring theme, but what's also interesting, and you won't find in the standard ones, is that, well, that connects to, so those first 5 numbers add up to 66, and then we have the mega number 42. So again, how 108 and 42 are separate there. Now what's really interesting about that, and that will link directly to the last episode and so many other, is that that creates a ratio of 11 to 7. Now, we'll come back to that, but let's stick with 108 for the moment, and Indian and Eastern traditions in general. So Hindus, Jains, Sikhs, and Buddhists, and Shinto, because they'll ring the bell 108 times on the New Year, and also in China, like Taoism as well, 108 is a sacred number. Now, for instance, the 108 serrations, Vishnu, the 108 symbols, the Upanishads as well. You also find, if you add all the numbers together, you get 432,000 syllables, I think it is in there, which is 108 times 4. But 108 beads on the Japa Mala. For instance, in Bali, 108 units of holy water, and then 45 units. Well, 108 plus 45 is 153, but that's nothing else, but still 108. In yoga, there are 108 sun salutations on the spring equinox. Now, even when they speak of the chakras, there are yogic schools that say, I think it's 112 chakras, but 4 of them you can't access. There are only 108 that you can improve, manipulate as well. So it's, again, this is a short list. Chakras and pressure points, 108. Again, most of the Eastern traditions. Sarangapani temple is one of 108 sacred temples. Now, again, you'll find 108 feet, 216 feet embedded in there as well, and that has to do with the origin of a supposedly modern foot. But now, for instance, Kailasa temple, 108 feet wide and 164 deep. Now, half of 164 is 82. We'll come to that, but again, 108 feet wide. In Madeira, the Sun Temple, 108 small shrines around the pool. In an older video on 108, I just went through all the, not just Eastern, but Western sites, and ancient and modern, that use 108 feet. And another one, but now this Prambanam, the temples were partly rebuilt, so let's say that's not 108 feet because maybe they didn't build it exactly the same, but you'll find in modern structures connected to Hinduism and Buddhism, 108 feet is used. 108 feet, 108 feet, 108 feet, 108 feet. Largest Buddhist statue, largest Jain statue, largest single granite statue as well, 108 feet. The largest stupa in Buddhist stupa in Europe, 108 feet high. The Great Stupa in Colorado, 108 feet high. Now back to ancient traditions, and now the li. What exactly was 1 li? There are definitions. That's a unit of measurement in ancient China. It depends which unit you use, but again, you'll get harmonic numbers again. But there was this saying, one must walk 108.00 li to reach wisdom. Now again, Sun Wukong, Journey to the West. Now 108 divided by 4 is 27. 27 times 5 is 135. Again, these harmonic series as well, but he could jump 108,000 li in a single somersault, and he made 72 transformations. 108 stars of destiny in Chinese literature. Again, 108. Now, for instance, in Shaolin, mentioned 108 with Buddhism. Now, when you have a big Buddha statue, it's said that when he died, there were 108 symbols on each of his feet. 216 in total, but 108 on each side. Now, when you go to, for instance, Wat Pho, he has 108 auspicious symbols on the bottom of his foot, but also there are 108 offering bowls. Now, in China, in Ningxiao, 108 stupa. And that's going to be slightly out, but we have 108 gates and 108 chapels. That will probably be touch out of screen. At Palcho, Young Buddhist monks perform 108 ritual prostrations in their room before going to bed. Recently in Myanmar, former Burma, they built a whole lot of pagodas and well, at 324 feet high, that's 108 yards, so just 108 times 3. And there's a garden of 108 bow trees, 108 foot high flagstaff, and it's a tradition to have 108 monks or 108 nuns in the opening ceremony, rituals connected to it as well. 108 feet long, 108 feet high. Angkor Wat, 108 statues. So on the bridges, there are 5 bridges. Now, 54 on each side, so 108 statues on each bridge. 5 bridges is 540. I'm not sure if I already mentioned that, but if not, the interior angle of a pentagon is 108 degrees, therefore 5 corners, which makes 540. Now, churning of a Milky Sea, let's just say devas and asuras, so, angels and demons, 54 on each side in this struggle, creating 108 figures. Phnom Penh, 104 towers arranged on 4 levels, so that only 33 are visible from any one side. 33 gods on Mount Meru, and this, in east to west, this, again, it's not just how 108 works, that's how you'll find all of these together. So keep in mind 42, 66, 33, but 108 towers were around the base. Anshan Jade Temple, 108 feet high building, divided into 33 levels. In units of weights and measure, you'll find, again, 108 all over. Ancient units of weights and measures, and 108 just being one of these constants. Now, even in modern time, so full HD, 1080 on the Australian dial. It's different, I know, in America, but in Australian, the AM radio is divided into units of 9. So, for instance, you'll get all the harmonic numbers. But again, in Australia, in American region, it's 87.9 to 107.9 on the FM. In Australia, Europe, Africa, it's 88 to 108. Again, screen resolution, screen proportions as well in the modern time they've just chosen the harmonics. It is whether they know it or not, if they will pursuing it, who's to say? But in all sorts of geometry, just the way that these fundamental geometric constructions, octagons 4-sided, again 108, 108, 1080. They'll just now even 300 degrees. That's 108, and then broken down into seconds. It's just one of those things. New Jerusalem, as I mentioned, with the Ark of Utnapishtim, 30. You'll find again, it's a perfect conversion point where you're going to get all of the, not just 108, but you get 33 and these other really important numbers as well. And back to the pentagram. It's beautiful in 3 dimensions, actually even including the 4th dimension. It's just one of those lovely numbers, mathematically speaking. Pentatonic tuning at 108, 72. And even, let's think of a solar, so again, ancient units of measure, even including the modern imperial, but 108 just appearing now. For instance, it's diameter of the sun times 108 will give you a distance from the moon to the earth. Diameter of the earth times 108 gives you the diameter of the sun. Diameter of the sun times 108 gives you a distance from the sun to the earth. Polar diameter of Saturn is equal to the slight vary, but the top speed of Earth, orbital speed, 108,000 kilometers per hour, and diameter of the sun, instead of times by 108, as from sun to Earth, times it by 1080, you get the distance from the sun to Saturn, and even the 27.3 angle of Saturn, but that's not the focus. Now, when it comes to tantric breathing, there are 216,000 breaths per day. The equatorial circumference of the Earth is, the nautical mile comes from dividing it into degrees and then minutes, and there are 216,000. So 216,000 is nautical miles, circumference of the Earth, which means you can see 10,800, and that's tantric breathing. 10,800 per day, 10,800 per night. And we come back to the 108 questions, 108, 42, in lost for recurring numbers on that lottery list, which was also connected to others. Like they had these number codes running through it. But 66 and 42 adding to 108, 66 and 42 giving us 711 proportions. Just like the Great Pyramid and so much other architecture right up to the modern times as well. Because if the half base is 1, then the slope angle gives us a golden ratio. And that the previous episode on this, PHI-llywood, where we talk more about that now. If you live in USA, Canada or Australia, probably many other places as well, what you've probably got is that there is a standardized street width. So that from property line to property line, your street would be 66 feet wide, maybe 33, maybe 66, maybe 132 or 99, but 66 is a standard street width across especially New Zealand, Australia, Canada and the US. And what you'll also find that is a standard is that so the sidewalk or the footpath is 12 feet on either side, which gives us a carriageway, so the actual road itself is 42 feet. 66 feet wide, the whole street, and 42 feet the actual carriageway. And it just so happens that 42 feet in the Cremona scale, which is a 6 to 7 ratio to the English foot, is 108 hands or 144 palms, while the 12 foot is 144 inches as well. Now that's another very esoteric number. Now, for instance, 144 is every major cathedral has 144 in it, and same with 108. So you find a major cathedral church, you will not find one that does not contain these very important numbers, which are again mentioned not just in the West in regards to the Bible, but you'll find it in synagogues, mosques, and Eastern traditions as well, going from the modern back to the ancient as well. I've done many series that are many hours long, detailing major cities, like US state capitals, Australia, London, Paris, New York, and all of the major buildings, not just some random building, but all of the major bespoke, very important buildings, temples, cathedrals, memorials and monuments always contain these very important sets of numbers, and it will be missed if you're not including these ancient units of measure, some of which apparently weren't rediscovered until scholars in the recent time, but just so happens that the past masters knew exactly how to build and design. This is nicknamed the Bean, or Cloud Gate in Chicago. It's by Anish Kapoor. Anish Kapoor is one of the sculptors that I've again explored in depth in the past. There is a handful of sculptors, architects that get the prime commissions, and they always include very significant numbers. Now, for instance, Cloud Gate is 66 feet wide and 33 feet high, while it's 42 feet deep. Now, mentioned as in the street of standardized, 42 feet is 108 hands, but the arch itself being 12 foot high, it's just like with the sidewalk standard, 144 inches. The omphalos, or the navel stone, I did a whole series on navel stones, bend stones, how these, but anyway, 27 feet high of the omphalos, that's 108 palms. So people just tend to think in yards, feet, inches, but if you include fingers, palms, hands, and the what we used to understand about imperial, it's always coming back to these sets. Now, if you look at Cloud Gate from the side, as I mentioned, it's 42 feet deep and it's 33 feet high. That's an 11 to 14 ratio. So just like with the pyramid is 7-11, because we have two triangles, we just have that same triangle again, which means again the diagonal here is going to give us the phi ratio. So 33, that's half of 66. So if you just made it 66 feet, and it's going to be 42 feet, and 42 feet is 108 hands. So again, 108 golden ratio. 66. Now again, just briefly: Sun, Earth, Moon, weights, speeds, size, time. 66 feet being 792, but again, I've covered that. But what we just have is these very harmonic, beautiful, if you use the ancient units of measure, It just perfectly converts. By whatever mechanism, by coincidence, by design, by some subconscious process we don't understand, humans through time have developed a system of weights and measures and architecture and myth and legend and traditions and symbolism, which just bring us back to the modern age and is just again repeated in modern architecture, modern culture, popular culture has simply replaced the old. Now the old Greek gods, well, we still have them. It's called the MCU. It's called the superheroes of the Justice League. We, for all our supposed development, we've just replaced one set of gods and mythology with another. Popular culture, we're into popular culture. We're not into that old super. Yes, you are. You've just swapped one thing over for another. The comic books have replaced the religious texts, and they fulfill the same need within us. It's just that we've have a certain cognitive dissonance when it comes to these things. Traditional folk music has been replaced by, well, I'd say, but we still have the same themes, and the popular culture it's just shifted over. Now, in regards to 42, again, very important number. So in ancient traditions, esoteric, Kabbalists, now 42 books of Hermes Trismegistus. Now the old, but that's 42 books of Thoth. So that's connected to the Djibouti, the ancient Egyptian god of weights and measures. Now in Egypt, there are 42 questions. Keep that, 42 questions. The Book of the Dead. I know the names of these 42 gods. Now also in the Bible, but you'll see it's also a nice number in magic cubes, for instance, in the Tree of Life, Kabbalistic traditions, and 42 generations before Jesus, 42 months a beast will hold dominion, and that goes back to the number 666 and the deep, the other connections that are again found in sacred architecture connected to Theosophy and Freemason, as we've discussed in earlier visions. Now, one of my favourite books of all time is the Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy series. Now 42 questions. Okay, now they built deep thought to find the ultimate answer to the life, universe and everything. The answer he gave was 42. Then he pointed out, well, the answer is 42, but you didn't ask the right question. You need to find the question, and the answer to that question will be 42. And that the question to life, universe and everything is what you need to find, and that the answer will be 42 and everything will make sense. But Douglas Adams and Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. But back to Cloudgate, which has that great pyramid proportions, which can be found again in so much other art, like Pompeii and the Louvre Pyramid and so many others, which brings us back to the golden number, the use of very specific measurements, which will bring us to very specific numbers, and this type of thing just being repeated. Now, 42 feet is in the Cremona scale is 108. Recently I just showed a video about, did Da Vinci make a mistake in Vitruvian Man by it being 7 foot high? And I showed the Ashmolean relief, and that actually the idealized human as described by Vitruvius of 6 feet, well, it was actually 7 feet. And you can find that also in the Egyptian units of weights and measures as well. But it just so happens that 6 Cremona feet equals 7 English feet, the 6 to 7 scale. Now, previously in the first episode I talked about Donald Duck in Mathmagic Land, and how back in the 50s these child videos were actually encoding maths and geometry, which is like what's happened anyway. But the use of phi symbolism even in the Disney logo. Now, I did back in 2016 a video on the esoteric world of Disney, going into Club 33, Disney himself being an order of a member of the Mole, which is a Masonic group. It's one of the affiliated bodies. It's basically for the youth in there as well, and all these. But I went through all of the Disney. I went through each of the Disney castles, but for this moment, I'll just be showing the Disneyland in Disney World in Florida. Actually, I'll show you another one as well. Now, that's 189 feet high. I could go into all the other examples, such as you'll find that in the first deck of the Eiffel Tower, and other important esoteric architecture I mentioned, like here in Australia, you'll find it in the Sydney Town Hall, and there's so many other places. But just so happens that 189 feet on the Cremona scale converts to 108 cubits. And these are also, all these are on the Pythagorean harmonic scale as well. And literally in the Disney Magic Land, he's talking about Pythagoreanism. This was going back to the 50s. This is no coincidence, people. This is, they used to tell us about this. In the age of information, we are being dumbed down. And instead of learning about mythology now, we spit on it, yet we watch MCU and Batman and all this other... I don't want to be mean, but we're being dumbed. You know, we are... No, sorry, let me correct that. We are dumbing ourselves down. In the age of information, we have the choice to learn and to invest. You know, we have libraries at our fingertips. A couple of decades ago, to study this type of thing, I would have to have spent tens of thousands, maybe $100,000 traveling to libraries around the world, spending hours and hours just reading each book just to find a snippet and then putting that together. We are the most privileged generation ever to exist. And that's not because we don't suffer from famine and these other things, is that we have the global information in a little machine that we carry in our pockets. This is beyond... In the past, they never dreamed of what we have in these little machines that we carry in our pockets and what we can use for these things now. We are responsible. You can say that it's coming from the top down. No, we must take friggin' responsibility for yourself. Anyway, rant over. That's in one of the Disney... I went for all the Disneylands as well. Now, there's another Sleeping Beauty castle in Disneyland, California, the original. That's 77 feet high. That converts to 66 feet Cremona, just like the George Washington arch in Washington Square in New York City, which has 55 stars and all these other things, and you can go to all these other places and major public buildings, both historic and modern. For instance, the Reichstag Dome by Norman Foster is 77 feet high. The Samuel Houston statue in Texas is 77 feet high, and it's the Cremona and these other scales have... Someone commented on a recent video, you can't even find it in Google anymore. I stumbled across it because I was just Googling the hell out of things trying to make sense of this, and came across it. And then again, you'll find it in the ancient traditions, not ancient traditions, in the ancient measuring conversion tools such as the Ashmolean metrological relief, the Salamis stone, Leptis Magna, and other places as well. It is not hidden. It's just you got to dig for these things. But yeah, this is indeed. So I could go on and on for hours. I've posted extensively on all these topics. I've covered hundreds of ancient sites, modern sites, major city and street plans as well, across time and across the world. This is an ancient tradition. It isn't even a secret. It's just that we've moved, I wouldn't even say in the materialist sense. It's just that there's this new sort of bias that I'm clever and secular, and I don't, you don't need to believe in Shesset and Thoth and Hermes and Apollo to appreciate what's happening here. And that's the sad thing. So that we'll spend hours and hours watching freaking MCU trash, rubbish, these are the new gods, and at least the old gods, and again, you don't have to believe in them, but the myths and the morals connected to them, even Bible legends and the morals and psychology are in there. All of the old religions and the old texts had depth to them. You don't need to literally believe and pray to these gods, but for God's sake, give up this friggin' Batman, Superman, Iron Man stuff, because they are devoid of anything. They are empty and vapid, and they will bring you nothing. They will bring you nothing as well. Anyway, another rant over, but it's in the ancient past, it's in the modern past. Some of them know. Maybe some are holding it like as trade secrets, or they feel smug because they're in the team and other people and the profane do not know these things. But it is there. it is measurable, it's repeatable, and at this point, if you don't see it after you go through it all, call me this is not a conspiracy. I'm like, literally, it's not a conspiracy. It's there. It's out there. If you don't want to accept it, that's great. But you're not a conspiracy theorist. You're even worse. You're a coincidence theorist. You believe in coincidence. So it's coincidence that the sun rises in the same place. It's coincidence that these happen. Well, get your head straight. Anyway, again, that rant over for the third time. I have to admit, I've had a couple of glasses, so I'm in a little bit of an excited mood. But again, I've done, and others as well, I'm not alone in this, have shown that in major public memorials, architecture, city plans, street plans, mythology, tradition, this is there. It's in ancient architectural texts such as if you're into ancient history, you haven't read Vitruvius, you're not into ancient history. Read Vitruvius. He talks about these things extensively. This was then transferred, for instance, Palladio, and this was in the neoclassical movement, which led to the architectural and city plan movements such as City Beautiful and Daniel Burnham. If you're in Washington, if you're in New York, if you're in California, it doesn't matter where you are, in Australia, Canada, New Zealand, London, Paris, Rome, you'll find that this architectural practice has been blended, and we just don't appreciate it anymore. We have this modernist rubbish architecture that's taken over. That's just, okay, my opinion, it's ugly. This postmodernist architecture, postmodernist philosophy, and all of that But if you prefer that, still great. That's your flavour. You like it. But if you don't know where as was it Cicero? If you know nothing of before your birth, you will forever remain a child. You don't need to believe in Zeus to appreciate what was connected to him. You don't need to believe in Jesus to appreciate what was connected to him. You don't need to believe in Muhammad to appreciate what was connected to him. You don't need to believe in the Torah to appreciate what was connected with these things. Same with Buddha, Taoism, Shintoism, or whatever. This is part of your cultural heritage, your architectural heritage, and actually your scientific heritage, because this has to do with weights and measures and mathematics and music and geometry and astronomy as well. So for the fourth time, rant over. And it's a thing. It's there. It's, what more can you do? Anyway, SGD, I'll end with a little animation, say connected to, for instance, 66 and these other things as well. I hope you enjoyed. It's there to be measured. Take responsibility for your own education.
In my own background, as a student, I did a thesis on sacred geometry, among other things. Yeah, it was actually called Architecture of the Dark Side. And this wasn't so much the dark in the sense of the occult, but simply the part of architecture that had been somehow occluded. In other words, we don't deal with sacred geometry in the modern sort of age, but it's occurred to me.
It's still completely random to my eyes. There's no way to...
I am ready to present a theory.
Pages and pages of data. Advanced. That means the efficiency functioning on multiple levels and in multiple dimensions.
But it's occurred to me that there are many people throughout history that have used sacred geometry and sacred places and sacred sites evolved, but we don't have them in Western culture as such. So I was intrigued by this. This was like 30 or more years ago, and of course the thesis proved rather disastrous academically. It just wasn't well received because it polarised people, and people in those days really weren't interested in the subtle underpinnings of ancient architecture and all that kind of thing. There's a different movement about now. I think more people are much more open to these things.
Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do.
on sacred geometry, so it took quite a while for the idea of sacred geometry as being worth talking about. 30 plus years to kind of come around. So to begin with, I was already steeped in symbolism and geometry as part of my background.
Let us go down and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech.
Incredible sounding organs, but they sounded different from the German organs. The English, had their organs and all that, and all of them are resident, they're analog computers. You build waveforms by adding harmonics. You can make any kind of waveform you want.